Don't mind if you hear the sound of a Blu-ray burner in the background. Not that I'm burning Blu-rays. I'm actually burning DVDs. Actually, I'm burning PlayStation 2 games, of all things. Boy, I got to tell you, there was a trilogy, shall we say, and I'm not talking about the great PlayStation trilogy, that being Colony Wars, or the other great PlayStation trilogy, Ark the Lad, which actually ended up having 2 sequels on the PlayStation 2. Not talking about any of that. No. The trilogy I'm talking about is kind of an impromptu trilogy, and that is Midway Arcade Treasures. Look, let me tell you, if you have a PlayStation 2, okay, or an emulator, if you're running an emulator, and you have these 3 collections, which is all these arcade games from Midway, you have a gaming library that will last you, nay, a lifetime. I mean, you have like 3 of the Mortal Kombat games, which are worth it alone. You've got Primal Rage. You have Hydro Thunder. You've got, and this is the best part, San Francisco Rush 2049. But it's the Dreamcast version that has that battle mode that'll have you playing for fucking ever. I could never get sick of that game. It's insane. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's classics on there too. Wizard of War, a whole bunch of them. If you have those 3 games, you're going to entertain you and your friends for fucking ever. I'm so not kidding. The only thing is, I wonder if the 4-player version works I'll have to test this out, because I have the 4-port adapter for the PS2. But the 4, the Dreamcast had 4 controller ports, right? And that would allow you to do a 4-player split screen of San Francisco Rush 2049. Again, it's the battle mode. I mean, the racing mode's great too, and if you ever actually played that in the arcades. By the way, this is your Voltron Season 7 review, but we're just opening up with some shit. But if you ever played Rush 2049 or San Francisco Rush 2049 in arcades, wow, was that a hell of a thing. And you remember you could put in your pin, like there was a dial pad on it and everything, and you could upload your scores to to a global database. Oh, fuck, was that some good times. There might be some classic stallion action in that if that database still exists somewhere, but though it probably doesn't. But anyway, you know that in the BDSM studios, there's always something going on in this. With some of the machines in here, they're always doing something. Right now, it happens to be doing that. But anyway, before we get into, yes, this is your Season 7 review for Voltron Legendary Defender, the Netflix exclusive series produced by DreamWorks. Before we get into that, we're also going to talk about Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the Legendary Defender comic book series from Lionforge Comics. What an apropos name. But that'll come later. But before we get into that, there is another, shall we say, 80s remake. I hate that these terms are so, they've really fucked with these terms. So reboot, I've talked about this before, but if you're like continuing a series, say that started in the 80s, and then you're like doing effectively a new season, or it's a sequel show or something like that, normally we would call that kind of a restart, or a continuation. But now they seem to use the word reboot for that sort of thing. Okay, reboot meaning that you're kicking the universe back into gear, not that you've reimagined it or remade it, but that you're just getting it going again after a decade or two. And so, but I'm so used to using the word reboot to mean that like you're literally restarting the entire universe and you're making up your own effectively. So reimagining might be the term that has, because remake I think works, but reimagining also I think might be actually the best technical term for this sort of thing. So Voltron Legendary Defender, of course, is a reimagining of the classic 80s cartoon series, which was really based off of a couple different Japanese anime, in fact tremendous ones, but particularly Beast King Go Lion, which is a brilliant anime, and I might talk about that on the upcoming Wednesday Q&A, because someone asked me what are my favorite anime. Well, Beast King Go Lion is certainly right up there with some of my favorites. And actually, I love 80s Voltron. I absolutely love it. And at some point, we'll talk more about 80s Voltron, I'm sure, in an episode on Patreon. But this is your review of Season 7 of Voltron. But before I get into that, okay, I do want to talk about, there's another reimagining, and oh yes, it is a reimagining, in the strongest sense of that term. from the 1980s, and that is there's going to be a new She-Ra cartoon. Now, initially, when I heard the news, I was very excited. Well, apparently a trailer came out. I don't know how I missed the trailer. I don't know how I didn't hear about it. But anyway, I finally saw the trailer for it, and the show is called She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, plural, princesses. As to where before, She-Ra was called She-Ra Princess of Power. That was the original 80s show. And, of course, the show is an offshoot of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, another cartoon that I'm a big fan of. In ways, I always liked She-Ra a little better. I thought Hordak was an even more badass character than Skeletor. And there were some other aspects to it that I thought were really, really cool. It didn't hurt that, I'll be honest with you here, or I'll be frank with you. The first gal that I ended up having sex with, and who was my best friend for a very long time, and we would actually end up having a relationship later on again in life too. But anyway, she was a huge fan of She-Ra, and she was blonde, and she had the whole thing. And anyway, just saying that She-Ra holds memories for me, and it has importance in my mind. This new show by DreamWorks looks horrible, and I mean just looks absolutely horrible, and it's sad because it feels like it's two steps back for the respect that 80s franchises seem to be getting, particularly the respect, certainly, that Voltron Legendary Defender has shown for this franchise. And I mean, holy shit, is that some respect? And look, it's not like Voltron's always been respected. There was the Voltron show, was this Voltron Space Force or something, whatever it was, that came out in the early aughts on Nickelodeon. That was horrendous. I mean, it was absolutely terrible, fucking teenage bullshit, or I shouldn't even say teenage, preteen bullshit, frankly. That was really horrible. And this She-Ra and the Princesses of Power looks like the same thing. It looks like preteen horseshit. And you can say, and here's the thing, okay? So when you watch, all right, let me describe a little bit about it. Like, She-Ra is not a woman in this. She's clearly like a younger teenage gal, okay? And it's probably going to be more comedic than it is serious, action, taking on Hordak and whatnot. Okay. As to where in the 80s cartoon, She-Ra was a full-on, I mean, she was younger, but she was a woman. She was a full-on woman, and and all the other characters were adults and so on. And it was great stuff and a wildly popular cartoon, no question about it. Now, the toys were certainly sold off towards a younger crowd, and definitely the storylines and everything were kind of basic and certainly geared towards a younger crowd as well. Not gonna argue with that at all. Okay, but here's the thing that annoys the fuck out of me. And I've talked about this with a lot of different things, and actually, like the Thundercats the new Thundercats cartoon and so on, kind of leads into this. But the infantilization of a lot of this stuff, I am not saying, and I mean this, by no means am I saying that there shouldn't be content, that there shouldn't be media geared towards younger people. Sure, there should be, but there's no need for why make it something just for them, especially considering that most of your younger people are getting raised by adults, right? I mean, it's a family situation. So make something that kind of I am more amenable to something that everybody can enjoy. And not only that, not that it's something necessarily that everybody could enjoy, right? But I think that when we constantly make content, when we constantly make media that is specifically like geared and what's the word I want to use here? I'm trying to think. Let's see. Something that edifies. How about that? That edifies, like that preteen kind of angle, that preteen age. People never want to grow. I think it really lends people to not wanting to really grow up. As to where before, you had She-Ra, and she was a full-on woman, and you wanted to become, or like with He-Man, you wanted to become a man, you wanted to become a woman, you wanted to grow up, and it was something to aspire to. As to where I feel like a lot of this, preteen horseshit has nothing to aspire to. And look, you can do this. I mean, take Star Wars, for example, okay? You can do Star Wars Rebels. You can grow up with the characters. Or take the Clone Wars, an even better example, Star Wars Clone Wars. You can grow up with the characters. Okay, like you can, you can still have Anakin, who's an older guy. You can have Obi-Wan, who's an older guy, and you can appreciate them and want to be like them and and you look forward to getting older instead of thinking that, I always want to stay young, like, I don't know, preteen fucking She-Ra. Like, it's just, again, I don't mind if you want to make stuff that's kind of tame and censored and, isn't going all out. I mean, certainly I agree that the original She-Ra was made pretty sexy and there could be problems with that, I mean, where she's got, I mean, there's cleavage and, she's got full makeup on and all this stuff. Like, I can understand if someone wants to complain about those issues. I get it. All right. But there's no real reason to make characters this way. I don't know. I was very disappointed to see this because, and I'm still pissed off about this because back in like 03, 04, there was a tremendous, maybe it was 02. It was 02. There was a fucking awesome He-Man reimagining done by Cartoon Network. And I mean, it was great. The animation was top notch. It's about the best thing. The only two, next to Voltron Legendary Defender and what Cartoon Network did with Thundercats, which was also what they did with Thundercats back in, I think this was like 2011. That reimagining was brilliant. And like, it had moral stories. It had the whole thing. It was really great. I mean, these are some of the best reimaginings done. You can do reimaginings right. I'm not just complaining because it's not She-Ra. I'm saying you can do reimaginings right that can be, really inspirational for kids and fun for kids, but then also can appeal to, a built-in audience that remembers these things fondly, like myself. And they're just dropping the fucking ball, and fuck them. It's like what they did with Lost in Space. They're just completely, I mean, is He-Man ever going to be in this, or is that going to be some kind of problem? It's just because He-Man's going to have to be a man. I hate to say it, like, he's going to have to be an adult, and oh shit, we can't do that. Fortunately, Voltron Legendary Defender has not fallen prey to any of this kind of horseshit. In fact, if anything, Voltron Legendary Defender, like as we see at the end of Season 6 and going into Season 7 of Voltron Legendary Defender with the character of Shiro, which, by the way, spoiler alerts ahoy. I mean, there's just going to be tons of spoilers here, okay? But trust me, you could know everything that's going to happen in Season 7 of Voltron Legendary Defender. You still have to see it because the action is so hot and it's so intense. I mean, you have to experience it. Nobody can, it's like the old Matrix line. Nobody can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. You've got to see Season 7 of Legendary Defender for yourself. But this actually really, I mean, you have characters that are old, that are heroes. I mean, really old. We're talking people that are clearly in their 60s. Shiro, who comes back, ends up like, he has gray hair now. Like he ages significantly, it appears. And you have, I mean, other character, Keith, of course, has aged out of his teenage years and everything. I mean, this show actually gives you like adult characters to fucking root for. And in fact, not even just adult characters, but hell, your grandparents could watch it and then say, oh yeah, you could be granddad, and kicking ass and taking on the Galra. I mean, that's awesome. And not only that, but because Voltron Legendary Defender is willing to play with adult themes and appeal to adults, okay, and to mature fucking people, even though I admit there aren't many of those out there, you can have where now we know, and again, spoiler alerts, folks, but that Shiro is gay. Granted, they kind of dropped the ball on it being more explicit, but it's there, and you know that he had a lover named Adam and everything, and of course that character dies, and he has to deal with that. I know they didn't do the best job of representing Shiro's homosexuality on screen. But I do appreciate that they at least tried, and they admitted, interestingly enough, the creators of the show at a convention admitted that there are certain things, and I mean, and it points at this problem of when you gear things entirely towards children, that there's limitations, and they admitted that there were limitations on what they could show, honestly, as far as the homosexuality, but they still get to hint stuff in. And myself, I mean, I'm kind of used to that because since the 80s, really, both musically and in other forms of multimedia, and into the 90s even, like we've had to deal with that things had to be sneaky, right? Like you couldn't write a pop song that, Cyndi Lauper can't just write a pop song about masturbation. She has to hide it in a song called She Bop, right? we have to hide these things, and we're still, unfortunately, in that world. And it's a shame. Look, I'm not saying that kids need to see, mature or, erotic content or something like that. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I am saying that kids are fucking brilliant. And yes, they are. They're smarter than most adults. Okay. And they can handle seeing slightly more adult-themed stuff. And I think that if, Shiro was more openly gay and we got a kiss between him and Adam, kids can handle that. And I think that would have been all right. Okay? That's fine with me. So anyway, but that's nice. And also, there were hints of lesbianism. And of course, you have the character of Pidge/Katie, who pretended to be, I don't think it's necessarily gender dysphoria, but it's kind of playing with that. And I think that that's great too. The Voltron can do all this. But those creators at the convention made the point abundantly clear that when you gear the stuff towards kids, there's stuff that you can't touch. And we're not talking about eroticism. We're just talking about straight up the way that relationships can be put on display and the way that, grown-up relationships can be done. And that's a problem as to where, and I don't think that should be. I think kids can handle this shit, just like kids can handle an episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine where, Jadzia's making out with a woman or whatever, this is okay. You don't have to go explicit. I understand you don't want kids to see that, of course, but they can handle this shit. And anyway, I'm glad Voltron at least tries, and they push the envelope as much as they can. I can appreciate that. Season 7 was definitely pushing the envelope here, and I want to finally start breaking into this season a lot more. Season 8 is something that we are confirmed for, and that is going to be the last season, as far as I know, unless Netflix decides to do something else. And that's a shame, because I think the show could go, even after seeing season 7, because the taste that you're left with at the end of season 7, because it is so intense, so action-packed, is holy fuck, what could they do next? Like, where do you go from here? When you've gone that far, you either have to, and usually in storytelling, and as a creator, writer, and storyteller, I know how this works. Usually you have to either scale back really hard and let people calm down for a minute, and then in the following season you can get back to full intensity. Usually that's what you have to do, but I don't know what they're going to do with season 8. Because again, this season was just so intense, and you didn't think it could get more intense. Boy, they fucking pulled it off in season 7. But yeah, we will be getting a season 8. I don't know when season 8's going to drop. I can't imagine, maybe into 2019. I don't know. The comic book series, the volume 3 of the comic book series that they're running right now, they're into issue 3. Issue 5 should drop before December. So if they launched it in December, I think that'd be pretty nice. And that would also work well, because what I usually review when I review one of the seasons of Voltron, I usually review it with also the Godzilla anime trilogy that Netflix has been putting out there, which has been tremendous. The third Godzilla movie in that trilogy is actually going to drop in December as well. So if we got season 8 of that, and then we also got that Godzilla trilogy, and we wrap up volume 3 of the Voltron Legendary Defender comic book, that would be, that'd be a really nice 1, 2, 3 punch right there. So maybe that'll be a review that we'll end up doing in December. So yeah, anyway, for a couple months, in any case, we're not going to be talking about Voltron at all, where it seems like we've been able to talk about it every month because they've been dropping these seasons like crazy. But part of the reason they were able to do that, of course, is that seasons, I guess 3, 4, 5, and 6, I think all 3 of those were very short seasons. They were really like seasons cut in half, where there are only like 6 or 7 episodes a pop. This is what is now considered a full season, I guess, is 13 episodes. Okay, so this was a more fuller season. Hopefully season 8 will be the same thing, where we will get 13 episodes, because I want every drop of this show that I can possibly get, especially after this season, even though I have no fucking clue where they're going to go next. I know this ends with a bit of a cliffhanger, but I don't know like what storytelling mode or theme that they're, whatever that, or how they're going to run that. I just don't know how they're going to keep up this pace that they've set, this tone that they've set in season 7. So anyway, let's start talking about season 7. And again, spoiler alerts abound. But season 7 has Voltron, then the Voltron Force, the Paladins, right? Just coming off of their major battle with Lotor and his kind of version of Voltron, as it were, which I think hold some importance to kind of a mystery that ends up at the end of season 7. But we're coming off of that, and it turns out that after coming out of like this quintessence dimension, more or less, that they ended up fighting and leaving Prince Lotor in. Voltron comes back, and it's been a few years. It's been some time since Voltron has been around, and in that time frame, both the Blade of Marmora, which is the Galra that are in resistance to the Galra Empire, and the kind of the Voltron alliance that is formed with a bunch of different alien species, have really been having a rough time of it. It's been a very, very rough time. And also, but then kind of, well, we'll get into it, because halfway through we start finding out what actually happened with Earth, because what Voltron wants to do is, okay, all this stuff has happened, we got to get to Earth, and we got to try and save the universe, save everybody from the Galra Empire. And it is the universe, because they are traveling literally intergalactically. Okay, it's not just within the Milky Way galaxy like a lot of science fiction. This is a genuinely, like, you're traversing the entire universe in the Voltron franchise. They got to get to Earth, and they're trying to get to Earth, but also Voltron doesn't have full power, so they can't really activate Voltron, so they're going at the speed that the average lion can go, and that's relatively slow. And that a good chunk, not necessarily the first half, but the first few episodes of season 7 is all about Voltron trying to get back to Earth, but it's doing it at an incredibly slow pace, going for months and everything. And we have some new characters that are following along. There's the Cosmic Wolf, which, let me tell you, the Cosmic Wolf in this, that's kind of what they call it. The wolf that Keith ends up befriending in, I guess it would have been season 6 or whatever, is such I love, this seems to be becoming a popular thing, because you have, of course, within Star Wars Rebels, there, you have the wolves in that seem to be connected to the Force somehow. Which really, we just know that Dave Filoni, who created Rebels and Clone, and whatever, that he just loves wolves, so he puts them in. They always the wolves kind of felt like an afterthought in Star Wars Rebels, as to where the Cosmic Wolf in Voltron Legendary Defender is becomes a major plot point and solves a whole lot of problems, and is just a really cool creature. It really works in Voltron Legendary Defender overall, as compared to, I don't think the wolves work so well in Star Wars so far. So kudos to Voltron Legendary Defender for that. But anyway, we end up with, we have another Altean character. You have Keith's mom, who is part of the Blade of Marmora and so on. I mean, and they're all kind of traveling along, and, Shiro's back. Shiro gets healed, and, his consciousness gets extracted from Black Lion and put into his new body. And of course, he ends up aging, like we were talking about earlier, and all this. I mean, all really cool stuff that happens in a very, very short period of episodes. But you end up with pretty much double the cast that Voltron has had historically, that Voltron Legendary Defender has had historically, and it works very well. And it's one of the amazing things, and in fact, this becomes even more important as we get into kind of mid-season of season 7, is just how quickly. It's really impressive just how quickly you start caring about. I mean, and this is total credit to the creators of the show and to the writers of the show, just how quickly you start caring about new characters. I mean, you seem to almost care about them instantly. And I think that's also the power of the art style, the power of the writing, the power of the music. The music is a huge key to this. I really cannot wait. Hopefully when this show ends, they're going to put out a proper soundtrack release, and I wouldn't care if it was 4 disc, and I wouldn't care if they charged $500 for it. I'm going to get my hands on this, because, I mean, this is just, the music in this is so precious. Some of the best music ever done for anything, for any media, not just animated. I mean, fucking anything. But the music, the art style, and the storytelling, and, all of that ends up really somehow causing you to care for very new characters very, very quickly. I mean, I've been saying that pretty much in every review, but it's the truth. Anyway, long story short, you have that going on. They're all just trying to get back to Earth, all these new characters, and of course the Paladins. In so doing, they explore a lot more the abilities of the lions themselves, but also the connection between the Paladins and the Lions, which I thought was really cool. And of course, that becomes very important in the second half of this season. And this is another season where really they could have split it in half like they had been doing before too, because like the journey to Earth could have easily just been season 7, then season 8 could have been what happens when they get to Earth, and really what is effectively very much a final battle, as it were, with the Galra. And then who knows what we would end up with in what would have been a season 9 and maybe a season 10. It would have been nice if they rounded it up to season 10. That would have been all right with me, even though at the same time, I'm glad that they didn't split the season up because, this is such a wild ride that you go on inside of 13, 20-some-odd minute episodes. So, you can really watch this in a day pretty easily, and if you did, you'd be breathless at the end of it. So anyway, eventually they do get to Earth, and that's really what matters here, okay, is that they do get to Earth, and around mid-season, then suddenly we get this nice 2-episode reprieve from really what's happening with Voltron, and you find out what happened during that entire time that Voltron was gone, because again, remember they were in that quintessence dimension, and then they ended up, 4 years in the future, something like that, or maybe it wasn't 4 years in the future, but they ended up some point in the future, and where the Galaxy Alliance is in the Voltron Alliance is in real trouble, and you find out that Pidge's dad, okay, he ends up getting back to Earth. And he gives, the Galaxy Garrison, okay, which is, what like the original members of the Voltron Force were originally, except for, of course, Shiro, who was already, like a lieutenant or something, ends up getting that they were cadets for. He ends up like explaining to them, okay, look, there's these things called the Galra, there's this thing called Voltron, and it's all going to come this way. It's all coming to Earth. Eventually the Galra are going to come to Earth, and we've got to start getting ready for it. And Earth does start getting ready for it. And we get this 2-parter. It's like Earth's Last Stand or something like that is the title of it. And this is really, really cool shit for a lot of reasons. But what it really reminded me of, and I am sure if I asked the creators or the writers that they did all of this on purpose. There's even there's not direct references, but a lot of the terms are so similar that I think that they were shooting for it. But you effectively, what they do is so, all right, hold on. Now, a year ago, it was a year and a half ago, Dynamite, the comic book company, they did a crossover with the original Voltron, not Voltron Legendary Defender, but Voltron and Robotech. Okay, and it was really, really well done. I should do a review of it. Maybe the next Voltron episode that I do, I'll do a review of Voltron/Robotech. But pretty much Voltron Legendary Defender did that, but they just put, they didn't have like literal Robotech characters, and Robotech, the Veritechs weren't actually there, but they more or less created on Earth with, again, there's a mixture of like Pidge's dad ends up, arriving in an Altean shuttle, so they have access to Altean technology, and they start making like this Earth/Altean hybrid technology, and they end up creating what are effectively Veritechs. And not only that, they end up creating an entire battle cruiser, much like would happen with, when Earth gets access to Zentradi technology, right? They create that giant, battle cruiser, and they create the Veritechs for Robotech, on Macross Island, right? So kind of a same idea here, but instead you have what's called the IGF Atlas, which is this massive ship, this massive spaceship that they create, or a space cruiser, battle cruiser. And they end up creating these fighters, which they don't really transform like Veritechs do, but they're, for all intents and purposes, they're Veritechs from Robotech. even the way that they, that the artistry is done to how they're flying these things. They call them MFEs, which means like multifunction extensibility fighter, something like that, whatever the hell it means. But anyway, it's MFE. Even the way they show that, it looks just like Roy Fokker, like flying the. It's really amazing. So Voltron Legendary Defender, mid-season of Season 7, effectively bakes in Robotech. And it's a straight lifting of the concept behind Robotech. And I have no problem with it. I think it's great. Like, I think that, that's been Voltron Legendary Defender's one of its greatest strengths, is that it's really pulling off of Star Wars. In fact, it's kind of doing Star Wars better than Star Wars does today, where it's taking all of these ideas from anime and science fiction and, in comic books and all these, different franchises and everything, and turning it into one mega franchise. And that's really what they've done with Voltron, and it's beautiful. And bringing in Robotech-esque, technology and ideas and story, plot lines. Bravo. I mean, bravo, boys. I mean, and you watch it, trust me, you can't mistake it. I mean, it's so painfully, obviously Robotech, but that's good. Like, I think it's a great thing. And having that crossover comic book from, a couple of years ago, really just kind of like pointed that this is really a direction to go, because that comic book showed just how well these two universes mesh. And well, anyway, we'll talk more about that a little bit later, because when, the whole, like, a beautiful job that they do of building up suspense in this for when the Galra are finally going to come is that they keep talking about the IGF Atlas. This, I mean, you see the MFEs all the time, and they have, like, young cadets flying it and everything, which is really cool. But, you keep hearing about the Atlas, but they never show it to you until much later in the season. And then when you finally see it, you're just like, holy fuck. And there's a million times when watching the season where you just keep saying, holy fuck, I mean, you can't help it, because everything just keeps evolving within it. So anyway, you have the Robotech angle to it, which I think was really, really cool. And that whole time frame where they're building up the Earth's defenses and everything, and how some of Earth's defenses really do shock when Sendak, who has taken over effectively the Galra Empire with since there's been a power vacuum of Hagar and Lotor, and of course the Big Daddy himself, Zarkon, since none of them are around, he's really taken over, and he's doing a hell of a job as far as Imperial ways go. But it's really cool that even he gets surprised by just how advanced Earth is when he arrives there, because they don't expect it at all, and it just works. But I mean, they start, when the Galra get to Earth, they start wiping out, because there's only the Galaxy the Garrison is the only place where they have any of these kind of defenses, like the particle shield and so on, that can actually stand up toe to toe with whatever the Galra throw at it. But the rest of the Earth, they just start ravaging. And it's, you feel the tragedy and everything. I mean, it's really impressive how they pull that off. But anyway, so eventually halfway through, you get that two-parter where you learn about how Earth is standing up against the Galra, and then Voltron comes back, and that's when things start getting, really, really intense and really interesting. And they're trying to figure out how can we really stop Sendak? How can we save the Earth effectively? And Sendak makes a point when he gets there. He's like, give me the Lions of Voltron and I'll leave the Earth alone. And there's an admiral who's in charge of the garrison forces, of Earth's defenses, her and Pidge's dad are constantly at odds, because she effectively says, look, if we have the Lions, like, let's surrender them and, let's let them leave the Earth. And eventually there's a betrayal that the Admiral engages in where, she does try to work with Sendak when Voltron finally does arrive. And of course, Sendak is like, well, thanks, but, now fuck you. Thanks for telling us their plans, but, now we're going to put a stop to them. Various things happen, and eventually they end up, the IGF Atlas ends up getting launched, and Voltron is there, and you get the big battle between the Galra forces led by Sendak versus the MFEs, Voltron, and the IGF Atlas. And it is a tremendous fucking battle. I mean, this is, on a scale, and again, the music's working for it, the artistry's working for it, the writing's working for it. You're just on the edge of your seat for entire episodes, seeing this huge battle with these like three different badass elements on Earth's side versus, the Galra. And it just works. It just works. And I haven't seen, honestly, this kind of action in anime, this kind of epic scale of battle. I haven't seen this kind of epic scale probably since like Gundam Wing, and done with as much panache since really, since I got to say, since like Gundam Wing. I mean, it's that epic. It's that emotional, because you already you have these characters that you so quickly care about. And some of them get put by the wayside, right? Like the other Altean gal, not Princess Allura, but the other one. You kind of forget about her, and the Cosmic Wolf sort of takes a back seat during the kind of the epic battle, even though it's there, but it the wolf does take a little bit of a back seat, even though it was integral really in the first half of the season. And the other Altean gal, I think she's going to become very important in season 8. So that's fine that they kind of make her a little bit of an afterthought. One of the cool parts that they do during this battle is when they do launch the Atlas, effectively Shiro becomes the captain of the IGF Atlas, which I thought was a great touch. Because he doesn't have Black Lion anymore. Keith's flying Black Lion. What are we going to do with Shiro? Come on. Like, he's such a cool character. We didn't kill him off like they did with Sven back in the original 80s of Voltron. Like, we got to give him something. And for him to become the captain of the Atlas was, I thought, just a brilliant storyline move that I wouldn't have thought of. I figured Pidge's dad would be in command of it the whole time, but no, they just end up giving it to Shiro, and it just works. Now, during this battle, there's a point where they, which is amazing, in the last 2 episodes of this season, they defeat Sendak. And they kill him. I mean, Sendak dies, and they end up beating the Galra, and then this thing kind of comes out of nowhere that starts attacking Voltron. And you're like, well, what the fuck is this? I mean, and it looks like, it's kind of its own Voltron. It's not like a bunch of lions. It's one thing, but it has a design language that you don't recognize from anything. But it can apparently drain the power away from Voltron as well as the Atlas. Like, it can drain Altean energy, I guess is what you would say. And I'm kind of letting the cat out of the bag here. But it's just this mysterious character that comes out of nowhere. You get no explanation, and it starts kicking Voltron's ass, and it starts kicking the Atlas's ass, and it ends up like wiping out some of the MFEs. And you're wondering, what the hell is this? And so the last 2 episodes, it's a 2-parter. The first part, you beat the Galra, and then they have to deal with whatever the fuck this mecha that I'll call it is. Like, what are we going to do about this? And the just when you think, because through much of this, like, you're finding out that effectively the Paladins can control the Lions telepathically, which is interesting, while they're imprisoned aboard Sendak's ship. Of course, that's what allows them to get freed from it. You're finding out that the Lions have all these other abilities, and so on. And like, so there's this constant, and this is part of what makes it so exciting, is you keep finding out like these new abilities that the Lions and that this Altean technology has. And that the Paladins can do, which is really cool. And in fact, there's a point where they're fighting this other mecha that, again, this mysterious mecha, I'll call it that, where they're fighting it, and it has 2 swords, and it's taking them on, and of course, Voltron usually only has 1. There's one point where, like, Keith says, hey, oh, wow, my Bayard port, which is kind of their weapon thing, it's glowing, it can do something new, and they put it in, and I'll tell you, I was hoping that what Voltron was going to be, because again, it just keeps evolving these new abilities, which I think is great. Some people might think it's a cheap storyline trick or plot trick. I think it's awesome. I was hoping like that the classic sword would appear, that it would form the classic sword. Instead, all it does, Voltron just forms 2 swords so that it can match the 2 swords of this mysterious mecha. And whatever, that's fine. But okay, so you think, well, isn't that kind of anticlimactic? Oh boy, it can form 2 swords. What a surprise. Well, what really gets exciting is that, it seems that this mysterious mecha beats Voltron and drains all of the energy out of it. And so what the hell are they going to do? And then it's attacking the Atlas, and the Atlas is in trouble. Its shields are down, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, it just got done with the big battle with the Galra, the entirety of the Galra Empire and Sendak. So, Shiro starts having this vision as the captain of the ship, and next thing you know, he says, all right, everybody, get ready. And suddenly the Atlas starts doing something. And just when you think you can't go, what the fuck anymore, the Atlas turns into a fucking, a mecha. It turns into like a Voltron kind of thing. And you just go, holy shit. Like, what can happen next? And the thing is it's huge. Like, it is a gigantic fucking mech. I mean, like, probably 20 times the size of Voltron. Like, it is a gigantic thing, and it starts attacking this mysterious mecha that had just defeated Voltron. Eventually Voltron gets repowered to various things, but you're just going, it's like when you saw the first time, if you're watching Transformers back, in the Generation 1 days in the 80s, and you learn about like Autobot City or Metroplex, right? And then you finally see Metroplex actually transform into an Autobot, into bipedal Autobot. It's like that, and you just go, holy crap, and you just keep wondering what's next. That's why I was saying earlier, with season 8, like, what do you do next? Like you have this badass battle cruiser that you build for Earth, the Atlas, and then inside of 3 or 4 episodes of you finally, or 2 episodes of you seeing the thing, then you find out the thing can transform, into a giant mech. I mean, it just keeps, they keep stacking it up. I can't imagine what's next. And clearly the Atlas is the replacement, like gets talked about throughout the first half of this season, is the replacement for the Castle of Lions, which you lose in season 6. And it's a good one. Like, I mean, nice job, and it has to be that big to be able to fit the lions in it, right? Even though we never see the lions really dock in it in this season, obviously that's the point. And the Atlas does survive season 7. So, I mean, that was just crazy. But anyway, Voltron gets repowered. They end up defeating this mysterious mecha, and season 7 ends with a very rousing speech by Shiro, where he calls them the defenders of the universe, which is of course a nice homage to to the 80s Voltron cartoon. And it shows Earth rebuilding after everything that the Galra did to it, and now it's part of a galaxy alliance because there's aliens on Earth now from like all the different species that came together to form the Voltron Alliance, and it's a very nice ending. But then you get at the very end, you get the hook, you get the the cliffhanger, and the cliffhanger is that they stored the mysterious mecha away in some bay, at the garrison. And they finally cracked it open to find its power source because they were wondering what was powering it that allowed it to drain power from the Atlas and Voltron. And there's an Altean inside. Dun, 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 dun. And I think this is pretty clearly my guess as to what this actually is, what this mysterious mecha is that we know from season 6 that Prince Lotor had that secret Altean colony where he was taking Alteans to, and he was experimenting on them and so on. This is probably the byproduct of Lotor's experiments on Alteans and using quintessence and everything. So we'll probably find out more about that in season 8. And I'm going to put out some speculation. I like to speculate responsibly, but I'm going to put out a speculation that we might get, like, Altea might be completely reborn by the end of season 8, and it could be kind of the center of the universe. Maybe it'll be reborn on Earth, I don't know, but I think we're going to end up having Altea back, and maybe even Princess Alora's dad will come back, the king there. But anyway, that's just a guess on my part. But very, very, very interesting cliffhanger, and a good one. And yes, of course, like I said, it's nice that we got to have a breather between. Or, we got a little bit of a breather between certain seasons, but I don't mind this cliffhanger because, I mean, you had to tell us where this was going to go next. Otherwise, we'd have no fucking clue, and I don't think there'd be any excitement, perhaps, for season 8. So ending off season 7, I still say that this is easily the best show, is still the best show on TV, whatever TV means today. This is easily the best show running still. And season 7 just proved it even more so because it was so fucking intense. The action was just incredible. Everything about it, the emotions that get parlayed, all of it, especially in 13 20-minute episodes, that is no small feat, but they pulled it off. So it's a shame that future series, it seems, that DreamWorks is producing are not as widespread in demographic and intensity of what they can, of what they're trying to reach and what they're trying to do. Example, She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. But season 7 of Voltron, I mean, hit all the right notes. It was really, really, really brilliant in how they pulled this off. And I thought season 7, I don't know, that it might be the best season, partly because of the addition of, the Robotech story elements and Robotech, effectively, technology. I mean, it's not Robotech, but it is. So a couple bonus elements that I thought were nice in this season. I think that actually it looks like Allura and Lance are actually like going to become a romantic thing. I think that's great. That Lance and Allura, like I dig it. Okay, even though I was digging, and I wish they would have went further with the Lotor Allura thing, but whatever. That looks like that was starting to build up, and I think that's really that's exciting. The other cool thing was they kept with more of the Earth technology. They kept quoting, and they've done this before too, but they kept quoting the classic line when in the 80s Voltron cartoon, when they would go into the Lions, all of the Paladins, or the space explorers in that sense, would say, Mega thrusters activated, Dynatherms connected, Voltron is go, right? And let's go Voltron Force. That's kind of the classic thing they would say. They kept talking about the Mega thrusters, and they kept saying they would say Dynatherms connected and everything in this season. And at some point, I wouldn't mind, because this show has at points taken time to explain new terms that they use. Not that Dynatherms is a new term. Again, it's a borrowed term from back in the 80s. I'd love for them to explain what the fuck Dynatherms are, because there's a few points where they say, oh, the Dynatherms aren't connected. And I love hearing it. And I mean, I've said that like a million times when I've either started a car or some kind of vehicle that I've been in, I have said Dynatherms connected like more times in my life than I could count. So I love it. But I would really appreciate it if they maybe wanted to explain, at least in this Voltron, what the Dynatherms are. But I thought that was nice that they kept referencing them, because it's such a well-known line from the original Voltron cartoon. Yeah, nice touch. I like that respect, really being paid here. So, I mean, and every time, like, they'd always be mentioned, like, because, fuck, like, in this season, it just seemed like it was super weapon versus super weapon, and then there'd be another super weapon, then another super weapon, like, there's the big gun that effectively Sendak made on Earth, and all this. I mean, if you're into science fiction a lot of times, like, for the technology, this is really your show, because that was so cool to just like constantly have. And then once you think a super weapon showed you all of its abilities, then it'd have another one. And oh man, it just, they just kept building up and evolving. And I think that's so badass. So anyway, all right, I want to wrap this up. This has gone kind of long, but then it was a longer season of Voltron. So, for it to go longer than the usual 20 minutes or so that I spend on reviewing one season of Voltron generally, it makes sense for it to go double that. But I want to review the Voltron Legendary Defender comic books, Volume 1 and 2 from Lineforge Comics. And then when Season 8 comes out, by that time, Volume 3 of the Voltron Legendary Defender comic will be out. So I want to review those quickly, and then we'll wrap this up. So the first thing I think to understand with the Voltron Legendary Defender comics, both Volume 1 and Volume 2, and really Volume 3, I think, so Volume 1 and Volume 2 are both written by Tim Hedrick, who is the main writer behind Voltron Legendary Defender, and of course well known for what he's done with Avatar: The Last Airbender, Legend of Korra, and so on. Volume 3 is only written by Mitch Iverson, who's like a co-writer for Volume 1 and Volume 2. But I don't know, like so far what I've read of Volume 3, I've liked. Now, the important thing to understand with all of these, with Volumes 1 through 3, again, Volume 3 is still ongoing, is it feels just like an episode of Voltron. Like, I mean, the artistry is there. The comedy is really there. That's one thing, when I was actually kind of re-going over these comics after watching Season 7, which, came out in August, beginning of August, is Season 7 little lighter on the comedy. I mean, it's still there, but a little lighter, as to where, amazingly, Legendary Defender, which, again, is a show designed, I mean, obviously it looks like it's mainly designed for kids, but it's really for all demographics. But what's amazing is how many times I laugh out loud watching the show. And I mean, it's another one of the reasons that I consider it one of the best show, or the best show on television, just because it can make you laugh out loud, while at the same time it can be just like Season 7 where it's action, intense, emotion, lost, all that. So the comic books are a bit lighter hearted, but no less interesting. Now with Volume 1's very simple. Volume 1 takes place, and again, I think these are technically considered canon because they get talked about, by Tim Hedrick, as if they're like really a thing. And there's nothing in them that I've seen so far where it contradicts anything that's going on in the show proper. So yeah, I mean, since they're done by the head writer, I would assume that, hey, these are the real deal. And Mitch Iverson's a writer, for the show as well. So, I mean, it all kind of fits. So Volume 1 takes place, and it's just called Volume 1, takes place in Season 1, between the episodes Rebirth and Crystal Venom, which I think are episode 8 and 9. And it's a basic, training the Voltron team in some kind of situation. Now, what's really interesting about this is that, and I've pointed this out in previous Voltron Legendary Defender reviews, is that there's a bit of kind of symbolism and alchemy and getting into kind of the dark arts, as it were. I mean, as in historical dark arts on Earth. Like there's some odd symbolism, even in season 7, where you have like that Shiro is missing his left arm. Almost, if one wanted to go far enough, you could almost say that was like representative of the left-hand path and of, maybe like Freemasonry, where when you wear or like kind of one of the initial uniforms in Freemasonry, as you're going through the degrees, is where like maybe it's your left leg and your right arm that's kind of uncovered. But anyway, I mean, one could go into those directions. That's a whole other thing. But Volume 1, kind of the main thing that they're taking on, first off, they're looking for a pearl, which if one wanted to get into some kind of symbolism, you could kind of think pearl of great price. But regardless of any of that, okay, maybe the most blatant bit of symbolism, symbolism or symbology? Yeah, symbolism. The most blatant bit of symbolism in Volume 1 is the Sphinx. And like there is a great Sphinx of the universe that they have to encounter, and that gives them this riddle. Now, the interesting thing is that this Sphinx, like it has the Voltron force go through a certain, like all these different tests, right? And what's really fascinating about that is that Pidge has to play it in a game of chess, and Pidge is like, wait a minute, how do you, you're the great Sphinx of the universe, you're out here, how do you know about chess? He's like, did you read that from my mind? And he says, no, I've been to your planet before, and I taught them chess. And then he cracks this funny joke, the Sphinx does, cracks this funny joke about like how humans tried to make the king the most powerful piece in the game, but really, eventually they learned their lesson that it isn't the most powerful piece. Of course, the Sphinx is alluding to the fact that the queen is really the most powerful. But that was really interesting. Like they sort of tossed in, okay, this is where the Sphinx came from in Egypt, right? Was this great Sphinx of the universe, and this is where chess came from. I mean, it's just a fun little thing that they toss in there, right? And one could get into kind of the Egyptian game of Ket, or the pseudo-Egyptian game of Ket, and kind of get into that, which is sort of like what they call, or what some modern game companies call laser chess. But that's, again, another one of those long stories that you'd have to get into. But I thought that was pretty interesting, where there's still more of that, looking at kind of ancient history, getting into some alchemy and things like this that I've mentioned this show seems to dabble in from time to time, and that maybe we'll see more of in season 8. I don't know. But I thought that was pretty interesting. And it was, again, Volume 1 was very funny at certain points, which also, that's another hard thing to do, is for a comic book to genuinely make me laugh. But this delivered on that. So Volume 1, pretty standard fare of a story. Volume 2, little more interesting. Now this volume is called Pilgrimage. And in Volume 2, you have this species that Voltron is helping get to their sacred hunter land, and it's like they almost look like Thundercats, this species, which is fine if they wanted to integrate Thundercats. Like we said earlier, they're already integrating Robotech. Why the fuck not bring it all on? But they're called, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's the Davdaba, something like that. Anyway, they're like this cat-like species. Now, the interesting thing with this, I mean, there's some really cool action sequences that go on within it. And this one takes place in season 2, right between the episode Shiro's Escape and Greening the Cube. So right in between those two. Again, there's no reason these aren't considered canon. I mean, if you have Iverson and Hedrick doing the writing, why not? But there's there's some funny shit in this. In fact, there's a couple of interesting comments, like I was mentioning earlier, about how, like, there's a character of was it Veronica in season 7 who appears to be lesbian, and of course we're talking about how Shiro is gay. There's a point where these two daughters of the king of the Devdaba, if I'm pronouncing that right, they want to, like the Voltron team says, okay, we'll help you get to your sacred hunting ground now that since the Galra destroyed the planet that you were on. And so the king dies, the king of these people die, and the two daughters, like it's their custom to marry, the biggest and strongest of, whoever's around. And that happens to be Hunk from Voltron. And but the thing is they're both going to marry him. They both say, yeah, we'll marry you. And of course he says, whoa, I'm not into that. We don't do that on my homeworld. But then, saying plural marriage. But then Pidge jumps in and says, oh yes, we do. We do plural relationships. And I was like, oh man, I mean, Pidge is just dropping in polyamory, because we're talking about way in the future here. I mean, sure, maybe there are Mormons, on Earth during the time of Voltron, but really, I mean, Pidge was just kind of like, really quietly dropping in a reference to polyamory. And I thought that was dynamite. And that's not the only, shall we say, unconventional relationship style that gets dropped in volume 2 of the comic series. But anyway, what ends up happening is these two daughters of this king of these cat-like people, they decide that they will fight to prove which one is worthy of Hunk's love and everything, and it makes for some pretty good comedy. Hunk is excellent comic relief within the show. But then what gets more interesting is there's a point where Princess Allura gets mad while on the ship, and for an instant, like the two princesses, effectively the two daughters of that king, of the cat-like people, the Devdaba, they say, whoa, she's actually the most powerful, and she seemed bigger than Hunk when she was angry like that. And their eyes kind of go to hearts, like that they fell in love with Princess Allura. So there's lesbianism, or bisexuality, actually, more specifically, on display here. Pretty, I mean, you could say it's implicit, but I think it's fairly explicit that they're putting that on. So I really appreciate that. Again, the show really does try to tap into those, or, kind of dip the toes into those waters of unconventional lifestyles and all, which, for fuck's sake, of course, we're talking about the future of Earth here, or future humans and who knows what else. And Princess Allura doesn't seem to be too offended either by the fact. I thought that was brilliant. But anyway, ends up with a really great battle sequence at the end of it. I mean, these both volumes have been real page turners, especially when you can read them all at once. And I kind of recommend doing it that way, one issue at a time. It doesn't hold up as well, but when you do it all at once, I mean, really, it feels like very much like you're watching an episode, right off of Netflix. It's that well done, and the artistry just lends itself so well to the comic book panels that I mean, you really can't tell the difference. So I highly recommend reading both of these volumes, and volume 3, when that gets finished, I'll do a review of that probably when season 8 comes out. I did also buy a book because again, I love this show. Again, best show on television. I bought the Paladin's Handbook, the Voltron, or the Voltron Compendium. There's the Paladin's Handbook, then there's Voltron's Compendium. I got the Compendium, which I thought was going to be kind of like an encyclopedia, and it doesn't really have any terribly insightful information. I mean, it kind of is an encyclopedia, but it's definitely geared more towards kids. So you can kind of steer clear of that one if you want, but do not steer clear of these comic books. They are brilliant, very well done, and I really appreciate, especially in volume 2, the references to polyamory and to bisexuality. I thought that was dynamite for them to do. No pun intended, because Dynamite didn't make these comics. Again, it was Lion Forge Comics, which that's a pun in itself, right? Because of the lions, Voltron's lions. So anyway, that's it. So yeah, season 7, the show's just still rocking. It's going to be sad when it goes. When season 8 hits, I hope maybe we can get a little movie or something in the end. And I don't mean a live action film or anything. I mean just an animated, kind of like a Fleet of Doom sort of movie, like we got with the original Voltron and so on. That would be pretty cool. Maybe they'll do a sequel series of some kind. I really, there's no need to do Vehicle Voltron. Just don't go there. There's just no fucking need. But this was, season 7, really cool, and the comic books, highly recommended. So anyway, that'll be it for this episode, for your latest Voltron Legendary Defender review. And we will review season 8 when it comes out, and probably when season 8 comes out, there will also be the third Godzilla anime movie that'll come out, and we'll review both of those back to back like we have been recently with Voltron Legendary Defender. And also I will review volume 3 of the comic book series, and I think I might review the Robotech the real Robotech / Voltron crossover, which isn't related to Legendary Defender, but certainly Legendary Defender is going all in on Robotech stylings anyway, which I couldn't be happier about. So anyway, all right, that really is it for this episode. I will see all of you on the other side.